Hi, I'm Lance Lambert. Thanks for tuning in to the Vintage Vehicle Show. We are in San Diego, California at the Only Yesterday Classic Cars Collection. This is a spectacular collection in that the cars are great, but also the memorabilia is great. It's one of the best collections we've ever seen. And who put this collection together? Well, Chuck Spielman, come on in.
Hi,
here.
Lance.
How are you?
Welcome to Only Yesterday.
All right. What else? You know, it's breathtaking when we came in here.
Oh, I'm glad the visual impact was good for you.
How did this come about?
This has really been a lifelong quest for me. I've loved cars ever since I've been really old enough to talk, I guess. My dad was a Chevy dealer, and I always dreamed of doing something with him, but as fate would have it, he closed up his business while I was in the service, and I went into another business, but always with a love of cars, and I decided about 16 years ago to see if I could do something with it in the way of a vocation to bring joy to myself, my family, and others, and here we are.
Well, you're bringing joy to us here.
I'm glad. That's great.
One of the things that's really neat, most collections I go into, they have the cars and they have everything around it to do with the car, but it's always usually automotive. Here you have period stuff. If you have a 59 Chev, you have 59, you know, what was going on in 1959 around it, not just automotive. A little bit different.
Yeah, it's a little bit different. You know, I'm very interested in not only the cars, but what life was like when the cars were new. So whether it's a 1930s car or a 40s or a 50s or a 60s, I like to surround myself with memorabilia from the time, whether it's road signs, neon signs, literature, and it makes me feel like I'm there. It sort of transports me back in time.
Mm-hmm. And then you have something very honorable here. You have the Hall of Heroes, a salute to the military.
The Hall of Heroes is a very special thing to me, probably the most important thing I've ever done. About 6 years ago, when I realized that World War II veterans were dying at the rate of about 1,500 a day, I figured it was time to take everything I had collected over the previous 36 years and put them into one place to honor World War II veterans. And so in so doing, their deeds would not go lost to history. Younger generations would remember how important they all were to us. And being a Vietnam veteran, I couldn't leave that out. Then I couldn't leave the Gulf War out, or Iraq, Afghanistan, September 11th, women in the military. So I called it the Hall of Heroes to honor all men and women who served their country.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's very neat that you did that. One of the things that came out of Germany after the war that over here a lot, the GIs brought back a lot of great German cars. You have an exceptional example here. Let's go take a look at it.
Let's do it.
Beautiful Mercedes, and that's pretty much what you can say about any year of any model of Mercedes ever made, I think. But tell us about this one.
This is a particularly rare one. This is a 1956 300 SC Roadster. Very rare car. Over a 4-year period, only 53 were ever built. So they're very, very hard to find. They're also impossible to restore because of all of the wood and the chrome. And they were basically built for luxury high-speed touring in Europe. Most of the time they came with fitted luggage, and they have the same engine as the Gullwing, but it's a big, luxurious, heavy car that was built for the Autobahns in Germany.
You say this is a 1956.
This is a 56, yes.
You compare this to an American 1956 car, and boy, they don't look anything alike.
No, they don't, and the cost differential was huge. In 1956, when a Chevy was around $2,000, or maybe a little more or less, this car was $12,500, which is a big difference in those kind of dollar ranges.
Mm-hmm. Performance-wise, they went fast and went around corners? Good?
They were good on the road, very good on the road, not quite as fast as a Gullwing. They had the same engine, the same horsepower, but the Gullwing was basically a race car that evolved into a beautiful street car, and this was made for grand touring. So speed, not so much an issue, but comfortable driving at superior highway speeds was the way these cars were built.
Mm-hmm. What is the engine in this?
The engine is a fuel-injected 175 horsepower engine, same as the Gullwing.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, beautiful car. A 1958 Cadillac Eldorado Brits. This is magnificent, and we just looked at that Mercedes. Here's a good example of the extreme difference in design. They're a couple years different in age, but still, this is big and American and flashy.
Oh, this is definitely the ultimate statement from the 1950s. 1958 was the era, you might say, of wretched excess in American car styling. So the cars had grilled teeth, they had chrome, they had beautiful wheels. I mean, everything was very flashy. So I was looking for a Cadillac like this because I wanted to sort of have the best of the 50s in luxury. And to me, this car represents that. It's got all the right options. It's got factory air conditioning, beautiful wheels, gorgeous interior, and it rides like a dream. It glides at freeway speeds. It loafs along at 60 or 70 miles an hour. And everybody takes out their cell phones when I drive it and gives me the thumbs up. And this is a car that always attracts positive attention.
You have a real cross-section of cars here. When you're driving down, say the Mercedes, and you get a certain reaction from people, and driving this, is it a similar reaction? Is it different? Is, the same people like both cars?
Yes, they do. It's a similar reaction because I think most people just love a beautiful classic car, and I don't think it matters very much if it's a car from the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, whether it's domestic, whether it's foreign. These cars bring a smile to people's faces because everybody can relate to them in one way or another. So the reaction is pretty similar.
You have a car here that, of your whole collection, a lot of cars here, I'll bet this particular car brings a lot of smiles, and it also brings a lot of good humor.
Yes, it sure does.
Nobody looks at this car and doesn't smile, would be my guess.
You are so right. This is an amazing piece of Americana and a big part of my childhood. I remember as a child, my sister and I chasing the Good Humor Man down the block, and I grew up with this and had a chance to acquire this truck about 5 years ago, and it still brings an amazing amount of joy to people's faces. We drive everything that's in here, and when I drive this down the block, people come out of the surrounding office buildings looking to buy a toasted almond or a raspberry ice. It's wonderful, and we ring the bells, and we even have the music inside, so it's just a great piece of Americana that everybody loves.
And it started out as a 55 Chev, is that right?
Yeah, it's a Chevy, which is a little bit unusual because my understanding of Good Humor history is that Chevy trucks were only used for about 18 months, and the rest were Fords.
Do you know the history of this, where it came from?
Yeah, in terms of the history of how I got it, it came in here for service, and a customer brought it in, and I was fascinated with it, and he also was into memorabilia, just like I was, and just over your right shoulder there's some Good Humor memorabilia that's on the wall, and that really rang a bell with me. And we serviced the truck for him, and I said to him, this was such a big part of my childhood. I would love to be able to own this truck someday. Would you please think of me when you go to sell it? And fortunately, he did. And that was about 6 years ago. And it came with a lot of wonderful memorabilia, a lot of great history. The refrigeration even works. The truck was fully restored. The graphics are beautiful.
It's a great looking rig.
Yeah, we like it. I'm glad you do too.
47 Ford Woody. It's not a wagon. It's a convertible. Very striking. I've seen a few of these. There are not many of them are yellow. Tell us about this.
This is a rare car. This is called a Sportsman. And there were only about 3,500 of them built over a 3-year period, 46, 47, and 48. This is a 47. I love the colors. It's like a maize yellow, and the wood is absolutely beautiful. It's mahogany. Stunning car. Special production line to build these. Henry Ford had his own forest, you might say, in Iron Mountain, Michigan, where the wood came from. And the cars were pulled off the production line, sent to a separate production line where craftsmen, carpenters would steam bend the wood. And they were very labor intensive to build. They were quite expensive when they were new, and there aren't very many that have survived. It has a 21 stud V8. 3-speed transmission, and when you drive this, you feel like you're on the cover of Town and Country magazine.
Yeah, of course. You have some pretty spectacular cars in this collection, but this is the one I want to take home, a 57 Chrysler New Yorker convertible. This is indescribable.
Yeah, I think you made a very good choice. These were very rare cars. I didn't know that at the time I bought it. I had seen it at Pebble Beach about 8 years ago, and the color of it just blew me away. I mean, the turquoise, the white, the fins. This was the forward look, Virgil Exner's forward look, and I'm sure I overpaid for it, but that didn't matter to me because I just fell in love with it. They were very rare. They only built 1,028, and I believe there maybe are 10 or less that are actually left. This one has 56,000 miles, cruises like a dream, runs beautifully, sort of the ultimate 50 statement in terms of length, color, weight. Everything that was good about the 50s is right here.
There's probably a Hemi under that hood.
Yeah, there's a very serious engine under that hood, which propels this car along just beautifully. Makes a great sound, 75 miles an hour all day long. Perfect car for that.
Was this a Pebble Beach winner?
It was on display at Pebble Beach with the Blackhawk collection, not entered in the show. I had actually seen it in an exhibit out on the lawn, and I said, I got to own that. I just have to do it, whatever it takes.
And it was part of the Blackhawk collection?
Then it was, yes.
Wow, that's means something right there. Yeah. It is really something. Do different cars in your collection bring out a different emotion? Are they all the same, or do you feel different in the 58 Cadillac and a little different in this and a little different in the Woody you've got over in the corner?
Yeah, they bring out different emotions. You know, when I'm in some of the 50s cars, for example, a car like this, it's all about cruising and making the ultimate statement about what life was like in the 50s. When I drive one of my Chevys, I'm back home again, more or less. My dad was a Chevy dealer, so I feel my dad's presence. I feel him riding along next to me. That's a very special feeling for me because I love my dad. When I drive my sports cars, it's all about loudness and speed, and that brings back a different type of a sensation. Cars from the 1930s, which you'll see in a little while, they bring on another sensation, so I never get bored when I drive these things.
No matter what they are, they feel good. But for me, when I'm in a convertible, I don't care what's gone wrong that day. Get moving in a convertible and everything is perfect with the world.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I'm lucky enough to live in this beautiful place where the weather's nice all year long. So for me, convertibles are the way to go in a beautiful place like San Diego where the weather's always good.
And I'm in Seattle, so if you go really fast in the rain, it just goes right over you.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, let's take a look at some of those 30s cars.
Sure, let's do that.
The term "it's a doozy" came from this manufacturer or people that admire this manufacturer. Tell us about this car.
This is probably the ultimate car from the 1930s. Very, very expensive in the 1930s. 1930s, we were in the depth of the Depression. People couldn't feed their families. They were out of work. If you were lucky enough to buy a car, you usually ended up buying a Ford or a Chevy for maybe $695. But the really, really rich, the celebrities, if they could afford a Duesenberg would very often set them back $20,000 or $25,000 in 1930. So the car that we're looking at here is a 1930 convertible sedan. It was fully restored. It has the original engine, the original drivetrain. We exhibited the car at Pebble Beach in 2011, and it won Best in Class.
Wow. Very impressive.
And we did the road tour then, so we drove it about 74 miles on the tour, 75 miles on the tour. Drove like a dream. People like Gary Cooper, Tyrone Power, some of the famous celebrities or business people of the day owned cars like this.
Were they always a sought-after car? In 1940, did people want a 30 Duesenberg, or in 1950, or was there a period where they fell out of favor and then they were rediscovered?
Yeah, there was a period when they fell out of favor, Lance. There was a time, and I think it was probably right after the war, right after World War II, that you could buy a Duesenberg for $500 or $550, and there were even a couple that during the war were lost to scrap drives. The Duesenberg is a very interesting car because the hobby can be very generational at times. As young people grow up, they tend to lust after the cars they couldn't afford when they were young. So technically speaking, the people that were young when this car was on the road are not around anymore. But the Duesenberg is a magic name, and generations since that time have continued to covet this car, restore it, and keep it alive. And because they were expensive cars, a lot of them were chauffeur-driven. They were very well taken care of. And out of the 480 that were produced, about 380 are still around.
Mm-hmm. Is this a wrestling match to drive, or is it a luxury car to drive?
A bit of a wrestling match to drive. It's a little like driving a cement truck with power steering. But when you go down the road, you feel like you're the king of the road. You've got a very, very long hood, and you look down the hood and you see the flash, the Duesenberg emblem in front of you. There's no feeling quite like that.
A 1935 Lincoln. Beautiful car, beautiful color, and off camera you were telling me some pretty interesting history on this car.
This has got a great history, Lance. This car was in storage for about 60 years. I was turned on to it by a friend of mine who discovered it and was going to restore it, but he had some other projects going on, so he thought maybe this would be a project I would undertake. I had not really thought about buying this particular car, but when I did the research, I found out that only 15 of these were ever built, and it had some romance because it had 10,162 original miles, having been stored for such a long period of time. And I commissioned a friend who has a wonderful restoration shop to restore this car, And when they took it apart and found the data plate, he called me up and he said, "You're not going to believe it, but it's body number 1."
Wow.
So being body number 1, there's a very strong likelihood that it could have been the show car that Lincoln took around to the different shows in New York. And one of the pieces that had to be replaced was the windshield, because the windshield did have a crack in it. However, when the car was restored, they saved the pieces of the windshield with the inspection stickers on them. So prior to my driving it last summer at Pebble Beach on the tour, the last time it was driven was 1948.
And it's Chicago, 1948, yeah. And right now there's somebody watching the show going, I don't know if that's the colors right. I don't think they had that color back then.
Well, it's interesting. When we took it to Pebble Beach, I knew that we may get questions about the color. And a very good friend of mine, who also is a customer of the restoration shop, had a banner from 1935 showing this particular car. And believe it or not, it was this color. And when we did go to Pebble Beach, the judge knew it was the right color, but he got a big kick out of seeing the banner.
Well, it's a beautiful color, and one that would, it's a little bit hot roddy. I don't want to insult your car, but it's a little...
Yes, it is. And what I like about it is what you're saying is true. It is a little bit hot roddy, but it's hot roddy from 1935. And I really like that part of it.
All right, it's beautiful.
Thank you.
A 32 Chrysler, absolutely stunning. And when I think 32, I think 32 Ford Roadsters. Well, this has some similarities, but it looks much larger and much classier.
Yeah, it is, Lance. This is a 32 Chrysler Imperial LeBaron convertible coupe. It's a convertible coupe. The body is by LeBaron. And of the 30s cars that we've been looking at here in the showroom, this is the one that I've had the longest. I've had this one 15 years. And only 28 of these were made in 1932, again, largely because of the Depression and because they were quite expensive when they were new. Only 6 are left, and I was told by a historian from the Chrysler Club that this is number 6. So this is the last of the line. And when I bought it, it was restored. Restoration was a little bit older, but still in really wonderful shape. And we did a re-restoration on it, a body-on restoration, about 2 years ago. And as you can see from the paint, it looks like it was done yesterday.
Yes, it does. Is there a straight 8 underneath
there?
Yeah,
there's a straight 8 in there. It's a wonderful car to drive. We drive everything in here. And the shift pattern is short, almost like a sports car. Drives beautifully. It's equipped with the stone guard in the front, which is a very unusual option. If you try to do that today, to try to find a stone guard, it is what we call unobtainium. You know, you just can't get it, and fortunately this car came with it.
That's great. I love trailers a lot, and they seem to be really coming on strong in the hobby. This one is very unusual. Tell us about it.
This has a very unusual history, Lance. This is a 1934 Bolus travel trailer. It's called a Papoose, and this is the one prototype that was built for the Papoose line. I believe 6 were built, and very few were left. And the history of the trailer company, it's a very interesting history, and it's linked to a fellow named Charles Lindbergh. Back in 1926 or 1927, Ryan Aviation here in San Diego got a telegram from an unknown aviator from the East Coast saying, need single-engine plane to cross the Atlantic. Stop. Can you build in 90 days? Stop. Please advise as to price. Stop. Charles Lindbergh. So they took the project on, and the project, of course, was the Spirit of St. Louis. And Hawley Bolus, who was in charge of fabricating the trailers, got friendly with Lindbergh, and they liked to go gliding in the California deserts. So when they would go gliding, they had no place to sleep. They would have to drive 100 miles to the nearest motel. So Hawley Bolus said, why don't I build us a trailer to sleep in while we're out there? So that's how the line got started.
And it has a little bit of an Airstream look to it?
Yeah, it has an Airstream look, very similar to what you see today. The Depression forced Bolus Trailer Company out of business, and Airstream took them over, and you can see the evolution carried it forward to today.
So kind of technically this is the first Airstream.
Yeah, very technically you could say that was the precursor to the Airstream, and if you notice on the inside it's furnished with all period correct accessories. I bought it from a lovely couple who actually used it, trailered it around. I have pictures of it going over the Golden Gate Bridge, and they took the time and the trouble to find original dishes, silverware, napkins, movie cameras, and I outfitted the trailer and set it up just the way it looked back in the day.
It's great. Chuck, you have a little of everything in your collection. You have a barber shop.
I do. I've always loved old barbershop equipment, and over the years I've been able to collect a pole and a steamer for hot towels, and I decided one day, you know, it would really be cute to build a barbershop in my 30s room. So we put the sink in, we made the drawers open up, we went out and looked for all kinds of period accessories, from razors to scissors to lotions, and now we can actually give haircuts here. So you look like you could use a little trim there, and if you've got 40 cents or 50 cents, we can get the job done for you. And I got my man Shaky Lou right here.
Okay, well, I'm going to give Shaky Lou a shot at this. Chuck, thank you very much for letting us
so
come
nice
out.
to have you here. Thanks for having me on.
Wonderful collection. And thank you for coming to the show today and following me into the barbershop. What a great place. Chuck, thank you again. And thank you for tuning into the Vintage Vehicle Show. If you're not watching, we don't have a show. And now Shaky's going to take a little off the top. Careful there, Shaky.